Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Humble Choice bundle for September 2024. This month has some really good games and was an overall win for me since half the bundle was on my wishlist. Let me know what you think of this month's bundle in the comments below. Be sure to check the timestamps for specific games, and stay tuned for my final thoughts in the end. Okay, let's get to the review. Starting off this review is You Suck at Parking, an arcadey driving game built around a brilliantly unique concept where you need to park cars to progress through the levels. This might not sound that difficult, but obviously it's not as simple as just parking them in a lot. Each level has a series of obstacles, boosters, and jumps to make your task of parking the car that much harder. To add to the tension, you have a timer and only a certain amount of fuel to get to each spot. Normally these things would scare me off, but I think it helps facilitate fast play so you could either quickly restart a level or play a new one. And if you end up careening over the edge or realize you messed up, you can instantly reset your car at any time, which is really nice. The driving controls were tight and responsive, with it fairly simple as a steering, an accelerate, and a decelerate. There is no reverse, so if you come to a complete stop, then that counts as parking, which obviously doesn't count if you're not in a parking space. I really thought their level designs were great and had a lot of fun going through the levels in something that I would otherwise pass up. There's also a multiplayer mode that looks pretty hectic, which would be worth trying out at some point as well. Following up is InfraSpace, a city builder with a heavy emphasis on production chains. I'm not entirely sure that I understood how I was supposed to be playing the game though, or at least not as the developers intended. After I spent my hour with it, I watched a trailer and was greeted with vast networks of industry built up around complicated supply lanes. And, this is what I made. I found this game to be kind of boring. I know it was in the beginning of the game, but nothing really seemed challenging. There didn't seem to be any curveballs thrown at me like a dust storm or anything like that. Although I imagine the challenges occur from the ever-expanding industry and the need to manage the necessary logistics of that, which I think is typical of production chains and city builders, but it just felt lacking here. I had it running at 2x speed and it felt like things took forever to get done. Eventually, I just got up to do the dishes and came back to check on it periodically. But like I said, after seeing the trailer, I think now I was probably supposed to be building up things to overstock my supplies unnecessarily so that I would have them down the line and to prevent the massive amount of downtime I had in the beginning. I think my issue with not getting the game, so to speak, may have been on me since I try not to look up anything about each game in the bundle before jumping in. But at the same time, I don't feel the game's tutorials really did that much to explain things. It reminded me of a mobile game telling you to click on things, but not really giving you any real explanation to any of it. Not to mention, I thought the overlays and the grass weren't really the most helpful. Some of it was intuitive, but other things could have been better. To be honest, I was surprised to find this wasn't an early access game. Maybe it's just me, but I know I won't be coming back to this one. Astrea, Six-Sided Oracles is our roguelite of the month in the form of a dice battler. You play as one of the oracles trying to purge corruption from the world. It was fun, but wasn't anything special for me. Although, as many of you know, roguelites just aren't my jam. But I did enjoy what I played here. Astrea has a neat system with the dice surrounding purification and corruption. The dice can be used on enemies or yourself, but the caveat is that the corrupted dice have to be used. Corruption will either heal the enemy or hurt yourself. Luckily, there are ways to avert this with rerolls or converted corrupted dice to purification ones. I also have a hunch that some characters might be able to use corruption to their advantage in their playstyles. And actually, this was already seen with the starter character in the form of virtues. Virtues are special abilities that can be played when the player drops down to a certain point on their health bar, such as getting rerolls, adding dice to your hand, or just dealing straight damage to the enemy. So sometimes it makes it lucrative to purposely take damage in order to use your abilities. Throughout each run, you'll gain passives and new dice to try and build out a playstyle for that specific run. It's fairly by the numbers in that respect. I did find the dice rolling though to be very satisfying. It reminded me of Armello, which also had good dice rolling physics. Anyway, I'm sure this will scratch an itch for those interested, but I'm unsure if I'd want to come back to this anytime soon. Next up is Lost Eidolons, a turn-based tactical strategy very similar to the Fire Emblem series. It has a AA quality to the game, where I could easily see it being used in the meme, "Mom, I want Fire Emblem," then using Lost Eidolons' picture with a "We have Fire Emblem at home." However, there is a decent game underneath some of the janky execution that I think fans of this style of tactical turn-based strategy will enjoy. The story writing is passable. It starts off with a tense situation before flashing back to where everything started following the mercenary leader Eden and his band of merry men. There are some weird bits of dialogue, but I found it to be engaging overall. The graphics are decent, albeit some of the characters just seem really, boring, I guess. Maybe it's because I'm too used to the vibrant colors of anime portraits and sprites seen in the Fire Emblem series. After some time, it didn't really bother me that much, but in the beginning, I couldn't help but feel so many characters look samey. The combat is fun, but in the beginning it starts fairly simple, which is to be expected. The intro scene showed just how it might expand with skills, but there's also different terrain that provides buffs or debuffs and can also be changed based on what elemental spells might be used. There's a simple rock, paper, scissors combat with certain weapons being better against certain types of armor, even if that didn't entirely make sense. I'm fairly sure an axe to cloth armor would hurt just as much, if not more, than a spear. But I digress. Anyway, there's a lot of tactical awareness based on positioning on the map as well as where the enemies were. I enjoyed my time in the battles. There's also a camp mode which you could walk around and presumably interact with people or upgrade units, but I didn't quite make it that far in my hour or so with the game. This had been one on my wish list for a while, and despite some of the rough edges, I think it's worth a look. Spongebob Squarepants: The Cosmic Shake is a nice follow-up to the remaster of Battle for Bikini Bottom this dev team did some time back, and we actually received in a past Humble Choice. Once again, I think fans of SpongeBob, whether current or past fans, will enjoy playing through this simple 3D platforming adventure game. It has a lot of nods to classic characters, but this time jumps into a bunch of different worlds for more visual flavor. The humor is silly and, yeah, stupid, but I think if you grew up with the show, then you'll probably find it a nice bit of nostalgia. Everything plays really well, but, as mentioned, it does seem to be a simple game, which makes sense since it's also targeting children as the core audience. The platforming is decent, and I appreciate not being too floaty, which always kills it for me in these games. There's also a certain amount of hidden or hard-to-reach collectibles for those curious enough to explore. Combat is easy, but at the same time, it was satisfying smacking everything with my jellyfish net. And there's not really much more to say. If you like SpongeBob, then play this. If you like classic 3D platformers, then play this. I haven't touched Battle for Bikini Bottom yet since we received it, but I imagine one of these days I'll come back to both of these to play with my daughter. Sticking close to the water in our follow-up game is Coral Island, a farming sim where you're on a cozy little island in a cozy little town. As far as farming sims go, this doesn't do much to break the mold. You move away to escape corporate life to settle down as a farmer. You'll need to do all the things that farming sims make a player do, like cutting wood, mining stone, fishing, fighting, taking care of animals, and of course, farming. What sets this game apart from others, for me, was the beautiful art. The characters all have a very Disney-like look in their portraits, which I really like. I really appreciated that the portraits were full body as well, rather than just the face like it's usually done. It allows for more of the character and their personality to show through the art. And there are a ton of characters. It's really mind-blowing the amount of time the artist must have spent drawing all these characters and their different outfits for each season. However, even walking around the world, I was constantly surprised at the little details the developers put into it. The world is beautiful, but I really appreciated all the animations they gave the characters to make them seem like they're actually living a life rather than just standing around or wandering aimlessly like in other farming sim titles. Additionally, there's diving in the game, which leads to a whole underwater section, which also drew my interest, but I wasn't able to do that in my hour with it. I know it's really early on in my time with the game, but I was very impressed with it. This has been high up on my wish list for a long while now, so I'm really happy to finally get my hands on the game. Stranded Alien Dawn takes the penultimate slot, which is the colony builder that is usually summed up as RimWorld but in 3D. And I think that's a fair explanation of it. Your colonists crash land on an alien world, and as a player you must help them survive in order to find a way off. To do so, you must manage your colonists' survival from the necessity for food and shelter, but also their own mental well-being. You'll need to have the colonists gather supplies in order to create a base, craft things like healing bombs and weapons, and of course, cook meals to make it just one more day. This is all something we've seen before, especially if you played RimWorld, but it's in a decent-looking 3D environment that adds something that RimWorld doesn't quite have. One departure from RimWorld is the characters are set and aren't randomized, like in RimWorld. I'm unsure why they decided to do this, but I'm sorta hoping it might make for stronger character storytelling. I really didn't notice much of this, and I'm guessing that it probably isn't as in-depth as RimWorld, especially to a player who spent countless hours in RimWorld's DLC as well. It was a fun concept, and I didn't notice any glaring issues with the game. That said, these games are always difficult to determine how they might be in just an hour of time, though. I'd say if you like colony builders, especially if you like RimWorld, then obviously give it a go. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy takes the headliner spot this month. This is a third-person shooter adventure game that has a strong narrative focus on, well, the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you're a fan of the movies, and really that's my only exposure to them, things might seem a bit off, but you'll probably get over it really fast. The essence of the characters are still there, whether they're played by their movie counterparts or taken on by the excellent voice actors used in the game. And there is a lot of dialogue. I found most of it entertaining to listen to, and it brings out the camaraderie between the characters. However, it borderlines on being too much. I really disliked it when they were in the middle of talking, only to then get cut off from another bit of dialogue that triggered. Happened far too much, especially with Rocket because he was the most talkative.
Gamora, when are you gonna share your contacts and sources?
When will you share yours?
What? You know about all my guys.
Only that you've got a guy that makes the booms, you've got a guy who can reconstruct faces, you've got a guy who never says no.
Oh yeah, I love that.
So far, the gameplay seemed alright. There's some bit of exploration to find upgrade material and a bit of lore content with written logs. Outside of that, there is some slight platforming, and of course, combat. The combat is fairly standard third-person shooter, with the addition of using the rest of the Guardians in support roles, such as Groot ensnaring enemies or Rocket tossing a grenade. Star-Lord also has his jetpack that he could use to gain height advantage over his enemies. It was a fun game, and given that it is Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm sure that I'll be returning to finish this one. Okay, let's wrap this up and see if this bundle is worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. Also, I'd be grateful if you could please give the video a like if you're enjoying it, because that really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm gods. Overall, this was a great month for me. I'm always happy when I can get any game off my wishlist, but to get 4, that's an insta-buy for me. And for those curious, they were Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy, Lost Eidolons, Coral Island, and Stranded: Alien Dawn. Although I did technically own Guardians of the Galaxy on Epic when they gave it for free, but had never played it. Speaking of Epic, we did get one other game, sorta. It was a playtest for a game called Rue Valley. I really don't know what to think about that. Not the game itself, actually it sounds like it might be interesting. It's obviously trying to capture the essence of Disco Elysium and tie it in with some time loop a la Groundhog Day. But an alpha test on Epic? I can't help but feel like part of my money went to pay to play an alpha test. Not the game, just an alpha. That feels wrong. And it being on Epic is just weird, especially since the game's trailer tells you to wishlist it on Steam. I didn't actually try it out, and I probably won't bother, but let me know what you guys think if any of you actually give it a go before September 30th. Without any further ado, let's get to the recommendations. As always, I'll start with the must-plays this month, and for me that's Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy and Coral Island. Coming off recently finished Marvel's Midnight Suns, shameless plug here to check out my review if you haven't already, and being a fan of the Marvel movies, I was definitely going to enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy. Really looking forward to playing more of the game and learning more of this ragtag team of heroes. Coral Island was another game that I knew I was going to enjoy from the get-go, but I was really amazed with how much extra effort was put into the game that the devs really didn't need to do, but it's more than appreciated. In my strong recommendations, I'd play Stranded Alien Dawn, Spongebob Squarepants: A Cosmic Shake, Lost Eidolons, and You Suck at Parking. Stranded Alien Dawn could be something that might be placed in a weak recommendation, but I didn't see any big red flags with the game, and I'm really excited about the idea of playing a 3D RimWorld. SpongeBob's latest adventure was a solid game. I'm not quite the target audience, but I'm sure I'll have fun with it whenever I decide to play it. Lost Eidolons might put you off with its AA quality, but if you're interested in the idea of it at all, then I think it's worth giving it a try. Finally, You Suck at Parking was such a good surprise for me. I love it when that happens with choice, and this one is one of those games that you have to at least try because it's such a short time commitment if you find out that you don't actually like it. And my week recommendations is just one, being Astrea Six-Sided Oracles. It was a fun dice game, but it's also a roguelite. These games get thrown at us so much now that it has to be something truly amazing for me to really think that highly of it. And in my Don't Bother With section is InfraSpace. As I mentioned, I could just not be understanding the game, but I don't think I'd be wrong in thinking that there are much better games to tackle various aspects that InfraSpace takes on. I realize that isn't really fair comparing this to AAA titles or massively successful indies, but InfraSpace just didn't seem that special. Again though, I might be the problem, but that can't be right.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Do you agree with my thoughts? What games, if any, are you looking forward to playing? Let me know what your thoughts are, or if there are any different recommendations you'd make in the comments below. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.